Welcome back to the Behavioral Threat Analysis Center Beyond the Bulletin. I'm psychologist Dr. Kristen Schneider, and here with me as always is my fabulous teammate and co-host, retired FBI agent, Mr. Peter Lapp.
Hey everybody, how are you?
We're going to be talking about an important but difficult topic today, which is stalking. Stalking is a pattern of repeated, unwanted, and excessive attention or harassment or contact that's directed at a specific person and causes them to fear for their safety or for the safety of other people. So this could be a difficult topic, particularly for those who have had any kind of personal experience with this. So we just want to provide a little bit of a content warning to folks ahead of time. If this is a topic that might be difficult for you to listen to, consider when and where you decide to listen. If, on the other hand, you'd like to learn more, you can also learn more about this topic by checking out our BTAC Bulletin on stalking from July of 2024. You can find that and all of our other BTAC Bulletins online at the DCSA website, or just search BTAC Bulletin.
You can
or
Google
you can
that.
Also subscribe.
Yeah, you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple and Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts now. It was cool. We just posted today our latest podcast. And what's really interesting about this podcast thing that we've just started is that the Apple and Spotify actually do transcripts of the show automatically. It's not Chris, our engineer extraordinaire. He's not doing that and typing it in. It's the software that's doing that. So I thought that was pretty cool. And I think we're going to start adding the bulletins that we talk about in our, as they call in the business, show notes. So look for that moving forward.
Yeah, try and make them easier for people to find. You can do a search right now, and we are going to be working on increasingly on linking up our topics, right, Pete, with the bulletins each month. So right now we're going back to some of our favorites.
Yeah, this is we have a really cool guest, and Kelly, our guest, is the first non-government. She's our first civilian, Kristen, like true civilian, not a contractor, not a govie, our first civilian. She is an independent go-getter. And that's a self title there, right? Self-description.
I think it's a pretty apt description. I think we'll do a little introduction on Kelly, and then we're going to ask her to tell us more about herself today. But I think she's the perfect guest for this topic today, for stalking. And I think there's a lot of different things that she could speak to. But I think we're going to find that having probably an hour is probably not even enough with her today. But just to share with folks a little bit about Kelly's background before we bring her in. Kelly's the founder and president of the Diamond Era Group, an organization whose mission is to help prevent trauma and save lives through situational awareness training. She works with law enforcement, nonprofit, corporate and youth organizations on emergency preparedness, situational awareness training, and personal safety. All very relevant to this topic, right? She's also the author of a book called Sharp Women, Embrace Your Intuition, Build Your Situational Awareness, and Live Life Unafraid. And she's also done a lot of podcasts. She also has her own podcast, the Thrive Unafraid podcast, which I have to tell you, Pete, she's got a little more podcasting under her belt than you and I do. So we might learn a thing or two from her today as well, on the podcasting front as well.
True. And we'd be remiss if we didn't introduce our government guest. As always, we bring in a guest from the government who oversees us. And today it's our boss's boss and returning guest, Brandon Neesent. Brandon, thanks for joining us and being here again.
Yeah, of course. I don't have anything really wise to say other than, if the word hasn't gotten out, please share. I mean, these are exciting. All the work that goes into drafting the bulletins. As you all know, the content just doesn't all make it. It doesn't fit. So this Beyond the Bulletin, bringing guests on, this is tremendous. So kudos to you, Kristen, and the team. Chris, for engineering all this wonderful work. The hits are increasing. The views are increasing. So thanks for the opportunity to sit here and listen to the magic happen. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and I did you draw the short straw from James, or did he just delegate this down to you and said you're going to be in here because he's the boss?
No, I actually fought for this.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
Oh,
it's,
awesome.
it's a great experience.
Thank you so
And anytime I get to listen to Kristen, voice made for radio.
Wow. Okay.
Thank you.
I see who her favorite, his favorite is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Real quick about Kelly, 2 more things that are really important. She's a mom, and if she talks funny, it's because she's from Minnesota. And yeah, so
Sure you betcha.
I'm told that she's a Vikings fan, a Minnesota Vikings fan. I don't really understand the whole skull thing, but in your defense, I'm a Philadelphia Eagles fan, and no one understands us anyway. So we're not gonna. We'll agree to move on and just get into our content here. I want to start out, Kelly, by asking you, what's your why? What brought you into this space specifically?
Oh, you're starting off with a good question, huh? Right away, going straight to the punch. So my why was I took a women's self-defense class. I'd never, to your point, I'm a civilian. I don't have law enforcement. I don't have military background. Didn't have a martial arts. But I was like, I have 2 little boys at the time. And I was married to law enforcement. So what am I going to do to keep myself and my kids safe? Because there's a little bit of a difference between having 2 young humans with little short legs and carrying a diaper bag and a handbag and all the things. You can't move very fast, hard to keep kids quiet, hard to get them to listen sometimes. And so I took a self-defense class. We spent the whole time doing the physical activities. And at the very end of class, the instructor said that ladies, predators don't prey that they think is going to overpower them. So you don't want to actually get into a physical fight. You need to be more situationally aware. Goodbye. See you. Have a great day. And my brain did a full stop. Like, wait, what is situational awareness? What does that mean? How do I know what I'm looking for? And then if I see something, what should I do? And the more I asked questions to find answers, the less answers I found. Everyone I spoke to who was in tactics and training, for executive protection, for government, for law enforcement, they all understood what I was asking because they have moms, daughters, sisters, female people in their lives that they care about. And so I was like, great, where can I go get this training? And they said, well, there is none. And I'm like, well, that's silly. There's women are getting attacked. Women are getting killed, every day by people we know. So we should be talking about this. And that organically grew the more I started studying the materials that were geared towards the law enforcement or geared towards the military and really getting into the foundational skills. I realized, well, these are things I do every day as a mom, but just in a different way. I know when my kids are sneaking a snack out of the cupboard because of the sound of the, door hinges. It's not because I actually have eyes in the back of my head, which I told them, but so it's these everyday skills that we use, but had never been relating to our personal safety. As I got older and into corporate America, communication skills, negotiation skills, how to stay calm during conflict. Okay, well, those are all things that we can apply in our personal safety, but no one had taught us how to use those skills in a way that keeps us safe. And so that really became my why is, well, this seems silly. Why are we not saying this? And I had more and more women coming up to me after my presentations, and even men saying, yeah, you should be teaching this everywhere. This is common sense, but no one's talked about it in this way. And so that's really the passion that I keeps me going, that I continue to thrive on, because I hear from women, I hear from people like, this is such important information. Thank you for putting it out there in a way that makes sense to me or I can relate to as a civilian, everyday person. And that's really what it comes down to is like, the more we know, the less we fear.
You bring up a really interesting point from the perspective of women. Dr. Braden, our colleague, shout out to her. She gave us some statistics. 1 in 3 women have been stalked, which is astonishing. And 1 in 6 men have been stalked, which I think is also astonishing. So for our conversation here, we're gonna talk about, like, we'll use women as because the primary victims of this is women, but it is just interesting how you have women clients, women that come up to you and talk about this, and but men as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm glad you shared that statistic, because that to me floors me as well. And when we start digging more into it, it really comes down to, in my opinion, definitions, right? Depending on the jurisdiction you're in, state, it is a crime in all 50 states and federally, but the way it's handled is different. The way it's charged is different. So it does really come down to, well, is this stalking or is this not stalking? And one common definition that I've seen that is a pretty good variable is it's 2 or more unwanted communications after a person has said, don't talk to me anymore. Well, think about all the modes of communication we have nowadays.
Oh, yeah.
That can happen really quick. Texting, messaging, phone calls, letters, unwanted gifts, packages. And then the other one is that it causes the target or the person who's getting, the target of those behaviors to feel fear or change their lifestyle. And so to me, I think what gets missed is that how psychological this is. And it's really hard. How do you articulate how you're feeling? And especially because in general, there's a lot of times we use stalking as a joke. How often have you heard somebody say, oh, I stalked their social media profile?
Great point.
I followed him home.
The way the language is used is not accurate.
Right. And typically in society, women will say it and they're viewed as less of a threat. But in the Journal of Threat Assessment Management, September of 2021, there was an actual study done on female perpetrated stalking cases, and they found that female stalkers are just as likely to be dangerous and violent as male stalkers, even though society doesn't perceive it that way. And if you've watched the Netflix documentary, I Am a Stalker, they did have a female stalker that they interviewed as part of the documentary. The behaviors, the psychological terror that the target experiences is all the same. So I think there's a lot of misnomers about stalking. So that's why, too, I love that you guys were going to discuss this topic and have me on today.
Well, just such an important topic that we have within the realm of threat assessment so many different angles just on this topic. I think within the International Handbook of Threat Assessment, there's not 1, not 2, but 3 chapters on stalking. And the reason is that we've got really different experiences, but or different fields that have been explored, right? So we've got research literature on things like stalking of public figures. We've got research literature that predominantly focuses on intimate partner violence, domestic violence, and stalking intersection. And those can play out in really different ways. But I think you bring up such an important point, which is that there's always this important component of the victim's experience and their subjective experience, which is hard to put into words, hard for people to describe and share with other people, but is really quite central to the experience of being a victim of this type of crime. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about your work with people that have had some experience with this and some of the unique challenges that you find in doing this type of work.
Right. I had a very interesting case actually on cyber stalking come up. I had been hired by an organization to do situational awareness training in the workplace violence prevention. Did the presentation. It was over on the West Coast in a large urban area. And a few months later, one of the employees was a dad, reached out to me because he had 2 daughters who ironically were both going to college in my state. But one of them was going through a master's degree program, and she had done some traveling abroad in a foreign country. And being there for 2 weeks is a short period of time, but out socializing, networking with other, young adults, making small talk, having conversation. And then when she got back stateside, all of a sudden started getting these messages from an Instagram profile. And identified themselves as someone that she had met while traveling abroad, and he was interested in her. And so, that whole like, wow, that was a lot of work to find me.
Mm-hmm.
But okay. And so she's like, well, again, we're young adults meeting new people, having conversation. But then all of a sudden she started to feel uncomfortable. The questions, the topics, the amount, the persistence.
Yeah.
And
that doesn't happen all at once, right? I mean,
No,
it's probably a growing, gradual feeling.
Right. And so then she said, I've basically blocked him. Well, he would just create a new profile with a different name. But again, blessing in disguise, he'd use the same profile picture. So it was pretty easy to identify that this was, could potentially be. But it got to the point where in some of those messages, he would say, oh, I see you moved to, oh, I hear, you're going to this school. He would make it known that he knew details about her. And so her fear was that he was going to show up. And now this dad, who's on the West Coast, daughter's here in Minnesota, she's changing her lifestyle. Mm-hmm. She's living in fear. She's afraid to talk to people now because what if they become something of a stalker behaviors exhibiting this? So her quality of life. And there was the fear of, okay, there are cases where stalkers flew across a country, flew across an ocean, and killed the target of their behaviors. And so dad's far away, daughter's scared, and they don't feel like anyone's taking him serious because it's a cyber stalker from overseas, And so I took the initiative to call where she was living and start calling. Okay, call the hotlines, call the victim advocacy services, call the law enforcement. And I spent 4 hours on the phone, and really it all came down to she needs to file a police report. And this particular department didn't even have stalking listed anywhere as, hey, if you feel like you're a victim of a stalking behavior, please make this report. Here's who to call. Here's a number. So for me, I'm not even the victim. I'm calling on behalf of the individual.
Well, sometimes
and I was
that's
getting
wonderful.
frustrated.
Right.
And so I was like, can you imagine somebody has serious concerns and is in different psychological states, trying to advocate for themselves and getting frustrated and feeling like no one's believing and listening. So it's one of those things like stalking, again, I think gets brushed over as, oh, just ignore them. They'll go away. Don't worry about it. What's a big deal? And you don't realize that the what ifs start playing in your head. And if you don't have someone to talk through, okay, how can we handle that? What would make you feel safer? What are some steps you can take? Here's some things to do.
Kristen, I want to ask you a question based on something Kelly said.
Yeah.
From a psychological perspective, why would the stalker tell their victim, I know that you just moved? Like, update them. Like, what's the psychology behind it? That's just fascinating.
It's a really good question. If you think about it, what is the likely impact of that, right? How does that make the person who is saying it feel, right? The likely impact is that is going to get their attention at the very least, right? It's going to provoke some type of reaction, ideally, right? It gets their attention, provokes maybe a fear reaction. Unfortunately, I think for a lot of people who engage in that type of behavior, that can actually feel good, right? It feels powerful. It feels like they're having some sort of control or impact over this person who is otherwise telling them, I don't really want to engage with you. I don't want to have anything to do with you. Please leave me alone. And that's not what they're looking for. So looking for additional connection, we know that can play out in a number of different ways and that people have different motivations. But I think that's really kind of the core of it.
Power and control,
power and control and looking for, in those moments, looking for a reaction from someone.
Yeah. Kelly, how do you, in your study of this, your practice of this, are your victims stalked by people they know, had some kind of intimate relationship with, and that doesn't mean just, boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever. It could be just coworkers, can be, friends, can be an intimate relationship versus complete strangers. And I point to, obviously the trial is going on. Luigi up in New York with the United Healthcare CEO, a victim. There was a period of stalking there. He didn't just like randomly show up at this board meeting. He had to figure out where he was going to be. So what's the ratio of victims that know their stalker and don't know? Do you know?
Yes. Well, according to the Spark Stalking Victim Handbook, that 76% of women murdered by intimate partners were stalked first. And 85% of attempted femicides involved stalking in the prior year. So there's a lot of that tie of it's an intimate partner.
But huge proportion.
Anecdotally, I have worked with women who it was a random stranger that it was like a situation of road rage, but in the parking lot, and for some reason, this individual got fixated and was just upset that this young woman took her parking spot, and that's how it all started.
Chance encounter,
but most of the time, it's some sort of fixation of an intimate nature or of a relationship nature. I know I had mentioned before we jumped on the Olympic runner, Emily Infeld, and she competed in the 2016 Rio Olympics, and then in 2018, the stalking behaviors from the individual started, and it was of we're going to get married, we're supposed to be in a relationship nature, to the point that she backed out of the 2020 Olympics out of fear. So it can start out as like a stranger, you've never met this person in life, but it can become of a relationship tie, and that's probably a question for the two of you to go a little bit further. And just as I said, I've worked with people and a coworker, female to female, mad somebody got a promotion and they didn't, and they started sending letters,
interesting,
an address, and it was assumed that we know who this person is, but there wasn't, the law enforcement decided that there wasn't a physical threat, but still that psychological impact was there for the victim of the behaviors.
And eventually I want to get to the law enforcement aspect of this, because there's a lot of gaps, in terms of the level of investigations, the experience of cops, and I remember I was listening to your podcast that you did about this topic, and training issues and training challenges and turnover, but also, a cop gets a call to help escort a woman to her old house to pick up stuff, but that's the call. That's what the cop does, but doesn't kind of pull back the onion and what is this all about? What else is going on here? So there's layers of things that could be. What's your perspective on how law enforcement handles this? What's your message to them? Because in our audience, we may have cops and law enforcement folks that give you an opportunity to message something to them.
Well, and they have a unique set of tools
that
are specific to law enforcement and are not for every situation, but are, certainly relevant to many of these situations.
I mean, from my perspective and what I observed while I was married to a law enforcement officer, is they are expected to handle a lot of different situations. Again, right now, I mean, numbers are down in departments, so woefully understaffed. The training, they have so much training, but yet not enough.
Right.
Or how is that training delivered? Is it in a way that they actually enjoy learning? And I know that might seem kind of foo-foo, but I'm sorry. If I have to sit in an 8-hour training all day on my butt in a seat, and it's boring and dry, the information is not going to stick, and I'm not going to be able to relate and put it into practice in my daily routine at work. So to me, I think it's a whole system failure, not an individual law enforcement, like the justice system, not understanding why those behaviors need to be viewed differently from a legal standpoint. Because again, officers are a reactionary force. They're responding, and they can't go, well, I can't take an action based on your opinion of what might happen. Yeah. So I think in general, we ask a lot of law enforcement that in all reality isn't their problem. like they can't do anything about it legally. And so I really, for officers, it's more of an educational thing. Like, hey, I've had individuals in the executive protection space who are obviously probably closer to dealing with stalking behaviors because of their protectee, and they think of their protectee as someone like an A-lister, or a CEO, C-suite person. So if their wife feels like somebody's making me uncomfortable in their behaviors, they're kind of annoying, and they're persistent, like, just ignore it. Just ignore it. And it's like, that's not always the situation. Yeah. Like, it still has the same psychological impact, no matter who you are, whether you're the A-lister or, the woman in the grocery store parking lot that all of a sudden became the target of the behaviors. It still has the same psychological impact.
Yeah. And I mean, before I became an FBI agent, I was a cop for 5 years. And so none of my comments were meant to be critical of law enforcement. I agree with you. It's a very tough job. It's a job I couldn't do right today, to be honest with you. First of all, I'm too old. But you get calls, and then, you might have an investigation with a particular victim, and then 24 hours later, you're off duty, and then it's somebody else getting the call. So that the calls for service don't go to the same person. And frankly, they're tough charges to press. They're tough. It's a tough case to make, unless you've got like 50 phone calls
right
within a very short period of time. Then it becomes a little easier.
That's a good point. I mean, part of this goes back to it's hard behavior to describe and to convey to other people. And part of it is having to help people understand how to use that language of objective behavioral reporting to describe things like, this was repeated and persistent, and he called 50 times in a row within an hour and 20 minutes, and, really helping to understand and paint a behavioral picture of what's happening, so that other people can understand it and appreciate it as well.
Is how you collect it and how you maintain it. Because if I'm, again, the victim of these behaviors or the target of these behaviors, I want to block them. I don't want to keep seeing text. I don't want to read the letters. I don't want to read the emails. That causes me emotional distress.
Right.
So therefore, how do I do? Because I need to show the pattern. We need to see if there's an escalation in the pattern. Yeah. But yet I don't want, I'm the target. I also don't want to manage it. So it's a really complex, layered situation of how to handle it, and then again how to communicate so that you can get the appropriate protection.
And there's probably a degree of like, I don't want to involve law enforcement. I like cops or I don't like cops, but I don't want to talk to cops. I don't want to constantly call the police and be that person. There's probably a lot of reticence on the victims to just be persistent when they need to.
Just want it to go away.
Yeah.
Right,
exactly.
I don't want to deal with this. I just want it to stop. I just want it to go away. I don't want to have to do anything about this. And yet.
Yeah. And to Pete's point earlier, so you get a call on, this day that you're working, and then the next shift you're off and somebody else gets the call. And so if I'm the target and I'm like, okay, I'm supposed to call if I see their car out front. Okay, well, now I'm getting an officer responding, and he shows up and he's like, okay, what's the emergency? What's the situation? Well, the car was parked outside. He might have just come from a bad car accident where he saw, people die.
Right.
And he's like, really? You're calling me because there's a car parked in the street? Like, and again, not excusing that behavior. I'm just trying to give sometimes that context. And then the target goes, yeah, I'm probably overreacting. It's probably not a big deal. I don't need to report this. This is silly. Oh my gosh, I just wasted their time. And so it becomes, you start it's almost like gaslighting yourself.
Right.
Oh, it's not that big of a deal. I should just ignore this. And instead, and where are they supposed to go then? Who are they supposed to talk to? Because I have also seen it with women at trade shows that are predominantly male. They'll come up and tell me stories, and they're like, they get made fun of. Oh, what do you think, you're hot stuff that somebody would stalk you? Or, ooh, so you don't like the attention? Must be nice. And so again, you get these conflicting messages. And if you don't feel like you're being taken seriously, then maybe you're like, I probably am overreacting.
Right. And there are very real consequences for that, because not every incident of stalking leads to acts of physical violence. But unfortunately, that is a very real pathway. right?
Yeah.
And so, the outcome, the potential negative outcomes are really, really significant. And, it makes me think we haven't really talked about why we would address this from an insider threat perspective, right? I mean, within our work, this stalking might not immediately seem like it's a relevant topic to insider threat, but I think it actually really is, because I'm not just for that piece of the individual impact on the victim, right? Who is an employee or a service member or any one of the population of people that we think about trying to protect, but it can have really pretty broad impacts to workplaces and to even just the culture of an organization, the types of things you're talking about the way people are treated and how these concerns are treated. I'm curious, have you seen this play out within a workplace setting? Is this something that you frequently see, the way stalking or maybe relationship challenges become something like stalking and spill over into workplaces?
I would have to say, trying to be in general, it's really, when you think about the pathway to violence, it's in that research phase.
Yeah.
It's in the preparation stage where, okay, they're trying to figure what am I going to do? And a lot of times, especially when it comes to a prior relationship, where do you know that person is always going to show up? At work.
At work.
They have to pay rent, they have to buy groceries, whatever. And so a lot of times that's the one place they know for sure the person's going to show up. That's the one place they can sit, maybe blend in the parking lot, depending on the size of the company. This is the one place you could drive through the parking lot to see if, the target's car is there, vehicle is there. And so to me, that's how it plays into that whole workplace violence prevention is, yes, this is maybe a personal matter, or in the past has been viewed as, oh, that's a personal matter, you need to deal with that outside of work. And it's like, guess what? It's showing up on your doorstep. And I think about women that have come to me and basically said, hey, I need to leave in the middle of the night, or I have to have a go bag because I'm going to be doing this while they're gone, to get out and to remove myself from the situation. And what else do I need to think about? And it's like, okay, so I get when you're focused on, I just need to get away. But now what is the plan going forward? Because as we know too, the most dangerous time for a woman to leave a relationship is when she's trying to leave.
Yeah.
Right? That's when
things tend to escalate.
Your point of control, and they feel like they're losing control. Again, where is that person more than likely going to show up? Because especially if they're going out on their own, work. They need to pay the bills.
Well, so to that point, we talked about the Olympic athlete who couldn't compete in the next Olympics. I mean, you got to be locked in. I'm assuming I'm not an Olympic caliber athlete by any stretch of the imagination. So I'm thinking you have to be kind of locked in to compete. I'm assuming that if we have a victim at work who's being stalked, their performance is going to decrease, and her boss, her coworkers may see, or him, may see this person used to be really, really good, and now they're kind of slacking here, or not presenting in a very, something's going on, and maybe we're not going to be asking those hard questions like, are you okay? Is anything going on? Maybe we'll see signs of physical injury that, so those are some of my thoughts in terms of why this relates to insider threat and how we should be looking at it in this space.
Yeah.
But curious as to your thoughts, Kelly.
It depends.
Yeah.
It's a favorite
Welcome
answer.
to our world.
Right.
Oh yeah.
One thing that I think, again, I'm not saying right or wrong. Part of finding solutions is talking about the problems.
Yeah.
And one of the challenges that I see a lot of businesses is they go, well, I think our EAP will handle that. If they're having issues, we're gonna hand them off to this hotline, or we're gonna hand them off to HR, and HR might not have the tools, policies, procedures in place to know how to handle it, or to recognize that this isn't a behavior that we need to do a threat assessment on, or we need to get more information, get more curious about. And really, again, I think it just comes down to that lack of awareness, the lack of understanding of how detrimental stalking and how it impacts, to your point, Peter, if they're not paying attention at work, and how long it takes. Think about when your coworker this isn't a good situation. Your coworker stops by to tell you a story, and how long that takes, and then you have to refocus and get back on task.
Yeah.
Now imagine if every time the phone rings,
Yeah.
there's that that psychological response of is that them?
Fight or flight.
Yeah.
Clearing through your system. Yep.
Cortisol levels constantly high. I mean, that's just going to wear you out. And then, two, your output at work is not going to be as good because you're exhausted, you're tired, you're distracted, whatever it may be. So this isn't a simple, we're going to give them some counseling through our EAP. It's no, this needs to be gotten more interested in, getting more curious about, do some more asking of questions, really, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, the other thing we talk about a lot is within the insider threat realm is access, right? So we've talked a lot about what to do and this idea that our victim may be internal to our organization. The reality, I think, is a lot of the time is the person engaged in stalking may also be internal to our organization. And then we've got a whole bunch of really complicated questions to answer about access and challenges there. So you're right. These types of behaviors are often things that get our attention, that make us uncomfortable, but that we don't know what to do with. And so, we've got to start with, I think, really educating people on how to recognize these types of things, whether they're seeing somebody being impacted by them or somebody who's actually engaging in this type of behavior where they're persisting in approaching someone who doesn't want to be approached, when we see that in our workplaces or in other parts of our lives. But I imagine that's one of the things, Kelly, that you really think about teaching people is, what do you do when your boundaries are being crossed? What do you do when you are in that situation where your alarm bells are going off saying something really doesn't feel right here? I think that's the point at which a lot of folks don't know what to do. Do you have any? I realize it's a big question, but generally speaking, I mean, I imagine you'd probably start by saying, pay attention to that feeling.
Yes. I try and remind people, again, pulling back from the emotion. It's I think you're collecting data points. So collect the data points, start to recognize, because then the patterns will start showing up and you can start to say, oh, is this something that I need to pay more attention to? Being self-aware. It is important to say that behavior is not okay with me. And yes, physical boundaries are easier to see because we can stick our arm out and say, please, that's how close I want you to be, with arm's length apart. But when it comes to mental and emotional boundaries, if there's an individual, to your point, inside the organization who is displaying those behaviors to a coworker, and so every time they're calling, suddenly they're finding every reason to come up and talk to you, and maybe that person, the target isn't interested, doesn't want to pursue a relationship, but yet has to maintain some sort of working relationship. So how do we have the discussion around boundaries? Can we go to our supervisor and have that discussion where it's not brushed off, or, they're just that way, they're just chatty. It's no, this is making me uncomfortable. And I try really hard not to go worst case scenario on this. And at the same time, I think we do need to recognize that if this is happening between coworkers, it is something to take seriously. We had an incident here in the city I live in fall of 2022, where it was a male coworker pursuing a female coworker. She rejected him. He showed up Monday morning as they were walking in the door and killed her in the parking lot as she got out of her car. So it's those type of behaviors where it's, no, this needs to be taken seriously. This is not to be brushed off. And I also want to play the opposite test a little bit is if it's a female to a male coworker, also needs to be taken seriously. Like, this is not just, oh, it's a female, she'll, just ignore her, brush her off, it'll be fine. Yeah. Or your buddies are
concerning
you.
Behavior.
Right. Your buddies
regardless.
Don't you wish you could get hit on this much? Don't you wish you had a female pursuing you?
Not really.
Yeah, no.
Not really. That sounds terrible.
Psychological.
Yeah.
Psychological.
Yep.
And, not, again, trying to excuse anyone's behaviors, but sometimes I wonder, because of the lack of definition on what stalking behaviors look like and the severity of it, do the people displaying those behaviors really, truly understand that it's inappropriate and that what they're doing is causing emotional and mental distress in the target of their behaviors? Because sometimes it's a simple, hey, buddy, person, this is not okay.
Not cool.
You need to leave that person alone. You're making them very uncomfortable. That it's a wake up call of like, I did not mean that. I just thought that I'm this playing hard to get. I'm supposed to be persistent, and it's like, nope. So sometimes that educational piece to get someone off the pathway to violence isn't thinking worst case scenario. Sometimes it's that simple. Hey, that's not okay. Coming from an outsider, maybe that's like a supervisor or a coworker that they respect, or a mentor in the organization. So it doesn't always have to be, sound all the alarm bells. And it starts with that data point, having discussions, treating people with, kindness. We don't want to deal with humiliation and have a grievance. That would not be good. But also, let's not stick our heads in the sand and pretend nothing's wrong.
And engaging other people's help when we need it, right? Not always just trying to figure these things out ourselves. These are really complicated problems, and finding support and help in navigating them sounds like that's a pretty key piece too.
Yeah, that's where we come to experts like the two of you. And now what should we say?
Now what should we do?
Having the BTAC bulletin, having discussions like in my book where I talk about that persistence doesn't mean romance. It doesn't have to mean that you have to say yes. It's okay to have a boundary and to say, that's not okay with me.
The key and critical abilities, and yet things that I find, a lot of us find challenging or never really learn how to do or get very practiced at. So, but I would also say it's never too late. It's never too late to learn how to set good boundaries and have good communication with people.
Mm-hmm. I mean, well, think about it. We all talked about there's like social skills and soft skills, communication skills, because of our electronics, because of keyboards, because of the way we communicate now. Some of those social skills and having a difficult conversation is really challenging. And like I mean, one of my favorite things to do with my work is to take experiences that are completely outside the realm of personal safety, but then help people realize, oh, it's that skill that you're focused on. Like I say, if the server brings you the wrong food at a restaurant, are you able to speak up and say, I ordered something different, or this wasn't what I wanted? Or do you immediately go, nope, I don't want to. I'm just going to eat it. I will shut up and be quiet and not say anything.
Yep.
And so
for some people,
that's a boundary. And it's not a bad thing. If I'm the server, I want you to be happy with the meal. I want a good tip.
Yeah.
So I hope that something's not up to your standards or your par that you're talking to me. But how much do we avoid difficult conversations because we're mentally exhausted, don't have anything in the tank? So we just ignore the behavior and hope it goes away.
Yeah. And especially in these situations where there's some lack of clarity, or we are second guessing ourselves naturally, or when other people are. So, but I do think it's one of those things where, particularly when you get other people involved, having those different perspectives can really make such a difference, because you can understand and see these situations in a different way. It's part of the reason why I think you need a multidisciplinary team to work on a case like this. And I think that's part of the challenge that we have is we go back to our conversation from before. Your average law enforcement officer probably doesn't have a whole lot of training in assessing stalking risk. I mean, most people don't, right? So where do you go for that kind of assistance? Certainly, if you're in the DOW, you can reach out to DITMAC and to the BTAC for our help. What about if you're somewhere in the community, you're dealing with this on a personal level? Do you have any recommendations for resources for where folks might begin to think about reaching out for help? I mean, certainly law enforcement, if you're at the point where you are scared and you're concerned enough, law enforcement is a good place to go. What if you're in that place between, you're not quite ready to do that, you're not sure if that's where you need help from? Is there anywhere else you can reach out to?
One thing that it's like this, read my book, that will help. I have a whole chapter on stalking, and or follow me on any of the social channels, but that one organization that's particularly I see a lot of, especially in January for the Stalking Awareness Month, is SPARC, the SPARC.
Yeah.
And on their website, they actually have, which I kind of like the name, the SHARP assessment. And
that is very good. Very good name.
Stalking, harassment, assessment, and risk profile. And it's a free questionnaire that you can take to kind of help you gauge. Because sometimes when we're in the middle of it, it's hard to pull back enough to see what should be my next step. And so doing things like that, I mean, nowadays, how much do we search online for information just quickly? And, making sure that there's plenty of resources out there are so important. Again, it depends. What's that situation? If it's a work situation, go talk to HR. Speak up.
Yep.
So wherever you feel comfortable, I know Pete mentioned earlier, if you don't feel comfortable going to law enforcement, well, then what are your options?
Right.
If you don't feel comfortable going to HR, what are your options? I guess to me, it's keep looking and keep pushing and find it, and hopefully, and even, call your local DV shelter, domestic violence shelter, because they might not be a domestic violence situation, but they have resources,
right?
And they can help point you in the right direction.
That's a good point. The National Domestic Violence Helpline, too, it occurs to me, even if it's not necessarily a domestic violence situation, can provide a lot of helpful information and resources to people, regardless of where they might live. Right. And I think also for our DoD community, we've got some unique resources, certainly through things like the military advocacy program, the family advocacy program. Will often have resources to help survivors. And then things like the DoD Safe Helpline, which is specific to sexual assault, but obviously there's potential nexus here as well. So the DoD Safe Helpline is available to people. But you're right, there's just so many different things, and they vary depending on where you live. But sometimes it just starts with a Google search of looking for your local area resources.
Yeah, speaking of Google searches, I mean, the internet, frankly, has made stalking so much easier, right?
Well, it's
unfortunately, the amount of information that's out there about people, all of us these days on the internet, is it's almost scary, to be honest with you. But I'm sure and you've been in this space since the internet's been a thing, and social media has been a thing. You've been here recently. I'm not, you're much younger than I am.
I was alive before the time
exactly.
of the internet.
I had an AOL email account. Like, that's how far back I go. I actually have the CDs from You've Got Mail. But no, the internet makes it so much easier to stalk. And I think, we're all, maybe from a situational awareness perspective, and perhaps you advise your clients, what you put out there on social media could bring you a fan club or two. And I'm not saying that from a positive perspective, and be thoughtful about what you think. I think of, people that I know who are out there that put a lot of content out there, and express themselves in a way that's okay, but you're gonna bring a fan club with
to be
that.
Selective.
Well, and here's the thing is, a big mantra that I have with the Diamond Arrow group in my work is, I'm never going to tell you to not do something. Point blank, end of story. Nope, you need to stop and not do this anymore. You need to not travel. You need to not post on social media, whatever. I always say, let's talk about how to do it the safest way possible. And that prioritizes your personal safety. When you're taking pictures, make sure your house number isn't in the background.
Yeah.
You know, make sure license plates are blurred out or cut out or edited. You know, look at the pictures and see, are there street signs? You know, again, have you turned your location data off on the back end of your photos? All these little things that we can start doing is, no, I don't think well, I shouldn't say no, because you should never say never and always. It's really, really hard to have all of your information off the internet unless you have pay a lot of money or you're in the witness protection program, right? Even I've worked with clients who were in the Safe at Home program here in the state. And I mean, that's where they basically do everything in their power to limit their information so that the person that they're in hiding from can't find them. And working with those individuals, it amazes me how really our information is in so many places.
Yeah, shows you how
so
challenging.
Publicly available. So again, it's not that I don't want people to hyperfixate or become so paranoid. Like, I can never post on social media. I can never say anything. I can't do this. I can't do that. Just do it and try and prioritize your personal safety and limit the amount of information you put out there. Try and change up your routine. Try and, drive a different direction to work every once in a while. Take a different route, take the scenic route.
Be a little less predictable.
Yeah. And so, because in my opinion and what I've seen from people that I've worked with is, if the individual who is trying to stalk you or trying to control you or find you, they're going to become almost hyper fixated on doing that. And so there's not a whole heck of a lot you can do to control another person's behaviors. So what you can do is just not make it easier for them.
Yeah.
And take the steps that prioritize your personal safety, letting other people know. Because a lot of times what that stalker does is to that control, and then you feel embarrassed maybe, or shame, and so you don't want to talk about it, when that's exactly what the stalker wants.
That's
is
great
that control
advice.
over your life.
All that free advice you just gave out to our audience. Thank you. That's wonderful. We're getting close on time. We've started to take too much of your time. We always ask our guests what they do for self-care. A lot of the things that we do, the things you work with your clients on are very heavy topics. Now, we met in Philadelphia and at an ATAP event in the city of brotherly love, my hometown. And I taught you the art of cheesesteaks.
Yes, you did.
We went out and got the best cheesesteaks. And I actually have a new best cheesesteaks in Philly for next time that we'll all go to.
Sounds good.
But what I've found, I kind of know what you do for self-care because you're very active on Instagram, the Diamond Arrow group, and your exercise routine. Now I know why you could have that cheesesteak, because you're in the gym constantly and consistently, and I applaud that. Actually, it inspired me to get my butt back in the gym. What I think is really powerful about your self-care is that you're teaching folks about taking care of yourself, not only being fit, but like being strong. And the things I'm watching you do on Instagram that you're posting in the gym, I am like, I don't know that I could do that weight. So it is a real good inspiration story to folks out there to follow your Instagram. How does the type of exercising you're doing not only help with your self-care, but kind of create that theme and that message that you're trying to get out to an audience?
And is it fun?
So just for clarity, because people are always surprised too when I say I work out twice a week for 1 hour with a trainer, all weightlifting. And people are like, only twice a week? And I'm like, that's all I have time for. But what I've also done it to peak point, consistently, minus the pandemic, COVID shutdowns, since 2016. And not only is it for my physical health, functional health as I get older. I have 2 teenage boys, so I want to be able to keep up with them, but also the mental and emotional aspect. Like there's just, it is literally my
It's
safe haven.
huge.
It is my self-care. But that, to me, part of why I post and share is also to show women that that can be your thing.
Yep.
Working out, it's going to have multiple benefits. But, you know, I also recently this year started working on my dad's old muscle car that he bought when he was 18.
Wow.
And him and I are working on that together because since I was 5 years old, I was like, that's my car. FYI.
That's so great.
Like, my siblings can split everything else if I get the car. So we started working on that because that brings me joy. So really, it's what just brings you joy. I like to bake too. We bake with my youngest. He likes to bake on Sunday. I'll bake and then I give everything away because I actually don't have a sweet tooth. I am much more of a Philly cheesesteak gal.
You're hooked. You're hooked now, aren't you?
But it's like what brings you joy, and it's recognizing. I had someone tell me one time that they consider it violence pie. So they'll be like, "Yep, too much violence pie. I need to step away." And I will do that. I try and be very cognizant, especially as of late with so many things that have happened and they feel like we've had a lot of incidents here locally. So it quote unquote hits home on top of other events happening in other parts of the country or even parts of the world that still tie. I mean, I know 6 people in Puerto Vallarta when everything popped up.
Oh.
And it's like, what are the odds that none of them know each other? Just different facets of life. And so you start going, this is so important. And just, you can start to lose sight and start to think that evil is everywhere.
Yeah.
And that all human beings are evil. Anne Rule was a true crime writer from the Pacific Northwest. Loved her books, but I would read one of hers. And then I was like, now I need to read a foo-foo book. Because if I read too many of that, then I'm going to start looking at everybody as a potential threat. So it really is, it's finding that where do you get joy to balance out some of the hard despair moments.
And we all need them. We all need them, whether we're threat managers, whether we're therapists, whether we're, independent go-getters like you. It doesn't matter. We all need that outlet and that balance because we'd hate for people to think there's a paranoia there, if there's a stalker behind every tree. But if there is, it's serious. And take it serious and report it to the right people and get some help and take care of yourself all at the same time. I want to open this up before we cut with Brandon. Do you have anything? Words of wisdom, boss?
No, I think today's episode really resonates. I'm a father of 3 daughters who are in various stages of their own life. And so, the question that kept resonating was answered multiple times by the free wisdom and advice that Kelly provided on how you communicate to young ladies in a world where you try to balance the not being afraid around every corner with being situationally aware that there may be a risk, and how do you handle that? So all in all, tremendous. Kelly, thank you. Pete, Kristen, you did a great job of keeping this engaging, and I look forward to the next time. So thank you, sir.
What I heard him say is, Pete, you're okay to go to Philadelphia.
I did.
And you approved. That's what I heard. I mean, I don't know about you. I don't know about you all, but that's a.
As long as I get a cheesesteak, we'll talk about it.
Sounds pretty good right about now.
That's what they're doing. We're going to go find our joy in Philadelphia, having a cheesesteak.
I have a new place. I have a new number one. So
I think that is the perfect note to end us on today.
Kristen,
Leave everybody thinking
you can
about
come out too. You're invited too. All right, everybody. Kelly, thank you so much for joining us. A super gift for you to be here with us, and appreciate
Really,
your thoughts and your time. And give her a follow on Instagram, the Diamond Arrow Group, and by all means, take a look at all the things that she's doing. It's phenomenal, and we'll see you soon, our friend. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you both of you for having me on. This was so fun. I've been looking forward to it.
Love to. We'll talk to you later, Kelly. Thank you. Well, that was really, really cool. I mean, how about for the first time a non-government employee and just, stepping up to the plate and hitting a absolute home run. Phenomenal, inspirational. I was inspired. I don't know about you, Kristen, but I was inspired.
I was so excited to have Kelly because I thought we would really get to have a conversation like we did where we get some some interesting ideas, but also some really practical advice as well, right? I mean, this is a topic that I think lends itself to talking about application to our own lives. And
Right.
she really, I think, brought that to us.
Yeah, I mean, it's great and people that have been stalked, they know it, but then to have some practical tools and advice on how to deal with that, I thought was something that only she could provide. That's the kind of information that someone that's in her space can provide, and just was so happy with her as a guest and her as a person. I do encourage people to follow her on Instagram and to see what she's doing. And she's a phenomenal public speaker. I heard her speak
She
in
is.
Philadelphia, and she just owned the stage presence alone. She owns the stage and is just so good at delivering her message. So we got another episode in the can. Let's
We do.
That's number 5, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. And we've got a couple more planned that we're going to be recording coming up here soon. So I hope everybody is following along and excited for new ideas. We're always open to suggestions for new ideas for bulletins and for podcasts. So if you've got a great idea for an insider threat BTAC bulletin or podcast, reach out to us. Let us know what you're needing in terms of training and topics, and what you'd like to hear us talk about. But we've got some great topics lined up and some great guests coming your way.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to leave a review. We'll take positive reviews. If you have some constructive criticism, you can keep them to yourself. But compliments or positive reviews are more than encouraged.
Especially welcome.
Appreciated. Yeah, because the bosses are like, so how's your audience? Our audience is growing, and what do they think of it? We'd love your feedback as to what you think.
We'd love to know.
Yeah, so until next time, thanks for tuning in to BTAC Beyond the Bulletin.
The views and opinions presented herein are those of the interviewer and/or interviewee and do not necessarily represent the views of the Department of War or its components, including Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency, or DCSA. Further, any reference to the use of specific resources or consultation with non-government personnel does not constitute endorsement by the Department of War, its components, or DCSA.